Attorney General of British Columbia, and MLA from Vancouver Hastings.
One of the oldest positions in the British-style governments, and it's the Chief Law Officer of the government.
She's a powerhouse in law, politics, and community advocacy.
I'm just a person that wants to spend my time hopefully making things better.
Were you always driven towards politics?
Growing up, I don't think I knew who my MLA was.
The internet told me that you were born in Lethbridge, but raised in Sparwood, BC.
Like Indian parents, the options are doctor, lawyer, engineer, right?
She practiced Aboriginal law at Donovan and Company from 2005 to January 2017. And
I have to do right by these people because of what happened.
The effects of colonization on Canada, the residential school history.
It was an example of government deliberately destroying a whole group of people. I'll tell you the stories that stay with me the most.
You were a young lawyer against a team of already pro group of lawyers.
You always have to understand your opponent's best argument.
The state of BC and how you and your government is playing a role in alleviating some of those issues.
Do you still trust me to make decisions on your behalf? That's basically democracy, right?
So you mentioned the Anti-Racism Act. You come from an immigrant family yourself.
Racism shows up in many different ways.
Your advice to other females out there who want to be leaders.
The thing about politics that like I always think is so hard to get your mind around is that,
and that's why I asked that question.
It's so like deeply personal because it's your values, it's your name, it's your background, it's your experience, but you can't take anything personally.
What exactly was the ground reality and how serious was the situation?
This is why I take it on the chin. Being the first woman of color AG, I just take it because I'm going to make it easier for these people.
Sat Sri Akal, Namaste, hello and welcome to the Truth Tribe Show. I'm your host Ravi Toor, and today we are discussing politics, law, and women power with a very special guest, Attorney General of British Columbia and MLA from Vancouver Hastings, Minister Niki Sharma. Minister Sharma, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's great to be on your show.
It's an honor to have you here, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. So who is Niki Sharma? She's a powerhouse in law, politics, and community advocacy, boasting a dynamic career that spans over 2 decades. Currently serving as the Attorney General of BC and MLA for Vancouver Hastings, Nikki has been a champion for environmental conservation, indigenous rights, and social justice. Her impressive academic credentials include a bachelor's degree in environmental biology from Queen's University and a bachelor's of law from the University of Alberta. Nikki's transition to a prominent legal and political figure underscores her dedication, resilience, and transformative vision. Nikki has garnered numerous accolades through her career, including being honored as one of the top 50 contributors of all time at Huffington Post Canada in 2016. She received the Premier's Award for Excellence in Collaboration from the Premier of the Northwestern Territories in 2014 for her significant work with the Wildlife Act Working Group. She was the Parliamentary Secretary for the Community Development and Nonprofit and held the position of Director at Vancity as well. Nikki also worked as a lawyer and senior campaigner at Standard and as a senior ministerial assistant for Minister of State on Childcare for the Government of British Columbia. Additionally, she has been actively involved in various organizations, including Push International Performing Arts Festival, Battered Women's Support Services, Vision Vancouver, and the Women's Advisory Committee, and also the City of Vancouver. She practiced Aboriginal law at Donovan and Company from 2005 to January 2017 and served as a Park Board Commissioner for the Vancouver Board of Parks and Recreation. Her early career included a parliamentary internship in South Africa with Parliamentary Monitoring Group and an internship in Ecuador as well. Niki Sharma's career is a testament to her unwavering commitment to advocacy, leadership, and making a positive impact on society. We'll cover all that and much more in our conversation today. But to start us off, Minister Sharma, who are you really and what do you really do?
You know what? I guess I'm just a very normal human being. And I have to say, you really did your research when you were doing that bio. You're going pretty far back. You're reminding me of some of the things that I've done. So thank you for that. You know, I think at the heart of it, I'm just a person that wants to spend my time hopefully making things better. And there's a lot of people like that I'm around that I've been lucky to be inspired by and have opened doors for me or supported me or done good work together with me. Also, I'm actually, despite having to be a public figure and being out there, I'm kind of introverted and a bit shy. So it's a stretch for me sometimes when I have to do the political side of it, although I do enjoy the work.
Very, very interesting. I would have never guessed that you were an introvert, but we'll explore all that today. So where I really want to start off, and this is just out of my own curiosity, role of an attorney general. Now I've been on Google trying to find different definitions of what
Yeah.
roles and responsibilities are, but in your own words, what is the job of an attorney general? How is it different than an MLA? And what are some of your roles and responsibilities today?
Yeah, so the Attorney General is one of kind of the oldest positions in at least British style governments, and it's the chief law officer of the government, but also the overseer of the justice system in the province. So my role kind of has it's a bit unique than other parts of cabinet. It's also to advise the government on laws and how we're abiding by laws and how we're not, to be the conduct of litigation. So my legal team is in court representing the government a lot, and the justice system in general, to make sure that it's going well. And generally speaking, international human rights, or human rights in general, or equality, and making sure our society through our laws are equal, is kind of part of my way.
Very interesting. So how I want to do our conversation today is kind of go back in time. We'll go back and forth and kind of make our way towards your present position. So what I mean by that, and this is, again, I take a lot of pride in my research. The internet told me that you were born in Lethbridge, but raised in Sparwood, BC. Can you take me to those early childhood days? What was your childhood like growing up in Sparwood, BC? Anything that you can share to kind of paint a picture for us?
Yeah, so Sparwood is a very small town, 3,000 to 4,000 people, depending on it. It's also, like many towns or smaller towns of BC, very related to the one industry that keeps the town going. And in that situation, it was mining. So my father came over from India during a time where they needed workers in that area of the province related to the mine. So he came there and kind of stayed there. He still lives there, raised 4 girls. I have 3 other sisters there. And I have to say that we were one of the few Indian families in the town when we were there. So, I definitely hear from my parents the kind of struggle of leaving India and going to a very small town, and that kind of transition of how that happened. It's beautiful, first and foremost, naturally. It's like the mountains and the wildlife. So I really felt lucky to be growing up in such a beautiful spot. And then at the same time, I was like very eager to explore other parts of the world or to do other things, because it was so small. So it was kind of a different balance. But by and large, it was a very lovely place to grow up. We could jump on our bikes and go, anywhere we wanted. And our parents would say, like, come back at whatever time. And generally, it was just like a very nice place to grow up. And my sisters and I are close, not only in age, but also just in our closeness. And we really kept each other company a lot. I have these like really fond memories of my mom would volunteer a lot at like local community events, and she would bring like Indian culture there. So we would be dressed up in whatever Indian outfits to show people what our culture was and stuff like that. It was also like that experience of exchanging cultures, I guess, people.
Very lovely. I actually had another guest on this podcast who was actually from Sparwood, BC as well.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So I don't know if you know the family or not, but it's Dampy Berard.
Yeah, Dampy. Yeah. He's, of course, his brother, Kiki Berard, was in my grade in Sparwood. Oh. And he was like just the hockey star. Yeah. He's in Calgary now, right?
He is in Calgary. Yeah. Right? So when I found out that you're in Sparwood, I'm like, they have to know each other. There's no way.
There's no way around it. Yeah.
Awesome. That's a small world. So, Nikki, what I want to ask you next. So now you're a minister. When you were going through your school days, let's say in your high school, what did you want to become? Like, what was your ambitions like? Were you always driven towards politics, or what did you want to do at that time?
No, I mean, politics, I couldn't have felt farther away from politics, to be honest with you. Growing up, I don't think I knew who my MLA was, and I don't think I really followed politics at all. No, nor did I even imagine that I would be Attorney General. I don't think that was in my makeup at the time, or even thinking. When I was growing up, I was very much, I guess, interested in social change or environmental work. So I was part of a lot of organizations in my high school, and science. I loved science. So I really wanted to do science when I was growing up. I loved learning about it. It was like really interesting to me, still is, but I took a different path. And of course, like Indian parents, the options are doctor, lawyer, engineer, right? Like that's what my parents would say, like anything other than that. So I don't think they even thought politician was a thing. So no, I don't think I ever even thought about it, to be honest. Not till many, many years later did I think about politics. And it was only after being around people that encouraged it. So.
Interesting. So you mentioned science. I guess that's my segue into what you did next with your career. So you went to Queen's University for an degree in environmental biology. What were your days like? Why did you pick environmental biology?
Yeah, so I think I wanted to go far away from Sparwood too. Like I remember having that feeling. It's so close to Alberta, but there were good schools around me, and I just wanted to go. So I went out to Queen's, and I still remember the day my mom left me there, and I was a small town girl, and they had to go back early, and I was there by myself. I was like, what did I do? But I wanted to do science because I wanted to work in conservation or science to do with conservation, and, you know, it was challenging. Like I loved it, but I remember the rigor of the degree that I had. It was environmental biology that I got. And I also had a great time. I made the best friends. I think I still have those friends today. And so I definitely enjoyed it. Queens is it's a small town. It's a big university, but it's still a small town kind of feeling. So in Kingston. So yeah, day to day was just making it through the classes. I also joined did a lot of volunteering. I think I get that from my mom. So I joined a lot of university organizations at the time and was able to do some really interesting things and meet some interesting people. The reason I stopped with science was because they had an option for your fourth year to apply to do like a mini thesis. So what it might be like to do an actual science or a research project, like you might do in your master's. And I did mine on arsenic contamination in the north. And there was really every day was like the sampling and the testing and the kind of lab work. And I realized when I was doing that I was around people that I actually was amazed by them because they would just sit there and look at the lab results of whatever test we were doing and just be so into it. They were just like, oh, this is amazing. Look at this. I didn't have that. It was kind of like started to feel like drudgery to me to have to do that every day. And so after that, I left science. I went for a year to Ecuador. That's when I went to Ecuador, and then I applied for law school. So I thought it would be like a different slant of it. So I stepped away from science.
Very, very interesting. I mean, I always believe you have to do stuff that really excites you, right? So if the stuff is not exciting, there's no point of spending time there. So you mentioned Ecuador and you mentioned environmental biology. Question on that during that time, or even right now, based on the climate change or the issues that we face, what is our top priority right now? What's the biggest challenge that we face in your understanding?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think climate change is a big one. I would say quality, like people's cost of living is also a huge one right now in BC. But I would say to do with climate change, it's one of humanity's big challenges, right? Because we have to transition to something, but we're also facing the impacts of it, right, at the same time. And it requires so much cooperation and so much effort at every level of government and every human, basically, that's either going to be impacted by it or needs to help with the transition. So it's definitely a big challenge for humanity. I think there's a lot of people that understand it. I think that our understanding of it has changed over time, and how people feel like they're connected to the issue or how they can feel like they can contribute has also changed over time. And, you know, I do see hope, even though I always get sad when I hear young people say that they don't know what their future is going to be like. I see things happening that I think are changing, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to all that, and we'll cover the state of BC and how you and your government is playing a role in alleviating some of those issues. So environmental biology, you went to Ecuador, and then you decided to pursue law. How did that change came about? What sparked your interest in law, and how was those years in U of A?
Yeah, you know, I feel like every stage in my life, I was really fortunate enough to have met somebody. And I say this to young people all the time. I think it's something that I always like to be around or with somebody that is better than me at something or is doing something that I want to know how to do. I have something to learn from them. I just think that makes your experience so enriching in life when you see that person or you're around people that are doing that for you. And I've always really benefited from that. So I think when I was in Ecuador, it was a project it's an internship and a project related to keeping the forest sustainable, but supporting the community around the forest, because really, if the community was supported, they didn't need to cut down the forest to sustain themselves. So it was kind of this social policy more on that side of it rather than the science side. And I was around people that were just kind of really interesting to me about what they were doing and how they were thinking of the world. And I decided that maybe law was the pathway that would help to kind of merge the interest that I had about advocacy and social change, and kind of maybe also the environmental movement. So I applied to law school thinking that way. And I think that's always kind of served me, being around people that inspire me or have something to teach me.
That's lovely. And I think it's very important for all of us to identify who those people are in our lives and really learn from them. So question on that, who would you then consider your role models and inspirations, and why?
Oh, I have so many of them. Oh man, I would have to, if you told me on different stages of my life, I would tell you who they were. And then I would think about, okay, I learned so much from that person at that time and they taught me a lot. So it's kind of been transitional. Even in politics, I have people that I'm like, oh, you're doing this so well. And how do you do it? I want to learn. And I guess I've always thought that way. It would be hard to narrow down one person because I don't think I lived my life like that, like with one person that's like the person. But I think it's just like, I mean, oftentimes, I'm sure you find that in your job. You meet people that you're like, wow, I learned something from you. I learned why you're passionate about that thing. It's so great. Like there's exchanges that you have in your life that make you think differently or push you in another direction. And I think that's always just like such an enriching part of it. So I've been lucky enough to have that, I think, at every stage of my life. Like when I started law, when I started science, when I started like different times, I had people that were there to inspire me. Or I sought it out, I think, because I needed it. So
yeah, no, for sure. So my role is all about finding people that really inspire me, right? So like that's where I go. I handpick people that I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I want to learn more about it, and hence I bring them as guests on my show, right? So all of you are my role models and inspirations.
You're learning every day then. That's great. Good for you.
Exactly, right? So let's go from there. So you did your law at U of A. Then you went to go work in Vancouver at Donovan and Company. And one of your specialization or your field was Aboriginal law. Can you walk us through those days of working there and some of the issues that you worked on? And correct me if I'm wrong. I think you worked for Supreme Court. You worked with residential school survivors. If you can just take us behind the scenes there.
Sure. So I have to say when I graduated law school, I felt like a little bit, and then maybe my last year or a year and a half of law school, I felt a little bit out of place. And sometimes law students tell me that now, but I think it's also changed quite a bit because I didn't really want the maybe traditional law career. I didn't really feel like that was for me. And anytime I tested it out, I had that kind of feeling of, oh man, it doesn't really speak to me. And so I looked for people that were doing work or places that were doing work that I wanted to learn from again, or that I thought was interesting. And Vancouver at that point in time was this kind of really interesting place when it came to Indigenous rights and what was happening there, but also it was at the time where people were not, actually took a few years after that, but cases were starting to go forward about what happened to people at residential school. It was kind of the first few who had already gone through the court system. So I was fortunate enough to get an articling position at a firm that was doing this kind of work that I was really interested in. So when I started out, I focused a lot on residential school survivors. So they were bringing their historical claims of abuse about what happened when they were taken to residential school. And they were lawsuits against Canada and the churches at that time for the conduct that happened. And I learned so much like that. I would say those 2 or 3 years of that time in my life, it was probably the most eye-opening about government structures, systems, the law, the justice system, what the tools are, how they work against people, how they don't work for people, the ways you can use the system. And I learned a lot from the individuals that were coming forward, because the level of bravery that it took to face the kind of legal system in that way was something that it still stays with me. Like I have a whole bunch of people that I represented years ago that I call regularly just to touch base with them, because they're just amazing humans. But it was quite something at the beginning, because I would be representing somebody and it would be against the churches in Canada. And we would go to an examination of discovery, which is part of the litigation process. It would be me as the young lawyer and my client and a room full of lawyers representing Canada and the churches. Like they just had these massive teams, right? And they knew that there were a lot of claims coming of people that had experienced abuses. So they were teaming up their lawyers, right? And they had, way more resources than the individual survivors, right, who had their lawyer with them. So it was really a battle for a lot of people. It was like, and I was their kind of representative in that situation. So you know, it was terrifying the first couple of times I did it as a young lawyer, but then I felt like I'm the person that has to represent these people's interests, right? I have to do right by these people because of what happened. So it was like that for the first years of my practice. It was kind of a great learning experience for me that I think I still carry that with me. I think I'll never forget some of the lessons I learned.
Yeah, kudos to you for kind of taking up that battle, because I think it was much needed to fight for the residential school survivors. So I have a couple of questions on that. First, you mentioned how tricky it was because you were a young lawyer against a team of already pro group of lawyers. How did you, or what did you do to make sure that you end up on the winning side, or how did you make sure that you're able to compete against this group?
Yeah, so I don't think there's any substitute for hard work. And I think like you can't take shortcuts in that. I really do believe that. Like I think there are people that maybe go through saying, well, I can get to a good result by just doing this bare minimum, but I don't think it ever works like that. Like you got to put the work in. Like you have to do the work. You have to prepare your client. You have to be ready for, and I had good advice from senior lawyers against that I learned a lot from. And one of the things that kind of stayed with me, that one of the senior partners, he taught me a lot. He said, you always have to understand your opponent's best argument. Because sometimes we get so entrenched in our own worldview and our own like way of thinking. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and then, so we think, oh, we must be right. Like there's no way we're not right because of this, and this, and that leads up to this. And so of course I'm right. Right. And I think in law, you have to present your argument to a judge or some kind of independent decision maker. And then so the other side's thinking the same thing. There's no way we're not going to win. Like we're totally right here. And we've established, you get embedded in your arguments. So it was really good advice. He'd be like, you have to remember, you have to always think like, what is your opponent's best argument? And don't be blind to that, because then you're not going to walk in thinking. So then you can design your arguments in a way that are like responsive to that rather than just avoiding it. Things like that, I think I learned. But, you know, I also, you know, like any young lawyer, I made mistakes for sure. Right. I definitely did that. And, you know, those ones stay with you too, right? When you think, oh, I should have done this instead of that. But those are lessons. I mean, we all need them when we're doing something new, but definitely that happened to me as well.
Yeah, 100%. And thank you for sharing that, because I've always been fascinated by the work of a lawyer, because you don't know what you don't know and what's going to come in the next day. So how are you going to prepare to ensure that you have all the bases covered? And that's why I asked that question. So another question just on that note, and this is because this past week we had another guest and we were talking about the effects of colonization on Canada, the residential school history. And there was a lot of traction and comments from people of all walks of life who don't really understand that, you know, so whether they're newcomers or whether they're people already here, people are like, oh, this is fake, this is not right, no evidence. You've worked in that field. Can you maybe give us some information as to what exactly was the ground reality and how serious was the situation?
Oh, it was an example of government deliberately destroying a whole group of people. So I'll tell you the stories that stay with me the most. And of course, I can't reveal specific details, but I have to say every survivor that I worked with. So you know that there was a time where when you reach school age, you had to go to school. And if you didn't, they would have either Indian agents or RCMP officers go to your house and take you, right? And I have to say, the moment that almost every survivor, when they were giving evidence, would completely break down was that moment that they were in the loving arms of their family, living their life, and 5 years old, sometimes younger, and somebody came and took them away. And their parents were crying. There were some people tried to hide and they were found. And they were taken away from everything that was like about their loving home and put into this very, oftentimes extremely strict, very demeaning, like you can't speak your language, we're going to cut your hair, like racist things like stop being a savage, abused physically, sexually, a lot of times in those schools. And the parents, on the other hand, were totally powerless to help their kid, because if they would have tried to take their kid, and a lot of them did, and a lot of kids tried to run away, they were put in jail. So you had generations of people that went through this really terrible system. that was government run, right? And run by, and oftentimes like given to the churches to run the schools. And I heard so many, because I represented a lot of clients, individual stories of what that trauma did and how it destroyed families, and how people took lifetimes to overcome, right?
Yeah.
And that's
Thank
very
you.
real. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Cause, I've only been in Canada for, let's say, the last 10 years, right? And when you come as a new immigrant, there is no structure in place to educate you about the history of the indigenous people and what went down with the residential school survivors. So that's why I think it's important for coming from you, because you've actually worked in that field and you have the firsthand experience on that. So thanks for sharing that. So from there, you did a lot of work in not-for-profits, and you sat on various boards, and then you made the transition to politics. Any particular moment or particular advice that made you think that, yes, now I have to take this plunge?
Yeah. So it was local politics first that I stepped in. And I think it was also just, I needed to balance, maybe because of the way my mom lived her life, she taught us that I needed to balance my professional life with some kind of volunteer work. So I always found like organizations or places I wanted to give my time to. And because of that, I met a lot of people that were either like associated with government or associated sometimes with politics. And it was, again, that time where I met people that were inspiring me or that were doing interesting things. And at that point, it was local politics that got me, because of some of the work that was happening locally on the Greatest City Action Plan and things like that. So I got asked to sit on an advisory committee that was for somebody that I knew that was in local politics as an elected, that she asked me. And then I just met more people. And then at some point during the election, I just met people that were very inspiring to me and included me. And then when the next local election came out, they're like, oh, you should run, you should run, you should run. And then I thought, I'm not sure if I want to, like, why would I, right? Because my tendency was not to be like in the public eye. And so I did. And then I learned a lot. And then I stayed away from politics for a while after that, did other work. So that was kind of the first step into it. And then years later, it was provincially, but that was local politics was my first step into it.
Very, very interesting. So you are now the MLA for Vancouver Hastings. What is it like to be an MLA? What are some of the challenges that your constituents face today, if you have to rate maybe top 3?
Yeah. So, I love being the MLA for the community that I represent. They're just really great people and always doing really interesting things. And a lot of really strong, bold leaders live in my riding. And you could say like almost any topic they do. So I'm really lucky to do that. We have a whole range of things that we do in our community office with people that come in with different issues or challenges or need help with something. And so it's something we're constantly helping people with certain different issues. But I would say, I was going to say the top ones, the kind of top 3 would probably, first one would be housing for sure. Like that's definitely being able to find housing that's affordable for a lot of people is a big issue. I have a lot of people that are environmentally inclined in my writing. So I definitely hear their concern or passion about that. And I would say that the other issues I think are related to government services. So it's like different things at different times, but those would be the top ones probably.
Interesting. And how do you ensure that your constituents are heard or they feel heard and their opinion matters? Like, how do you make them feel that?
Yeah. So I have a great team in my constituency office that we all come at the work with trying to solve problems for people or understand what their perspectives are and giving them information they need. Or, I think it's really important for me to understand where people are coming from, even if I disagree with them, because I represent them. They've put trust in me to bring their voice to Victoria. So 2 things that I always keep in mind. And one is my job is to understand and hear everybody's perspective. So they come to me with their issue. I need to ask, okay, why do you think that way? What are the issues? Why are you upset about this thing about government? And then if I don't agree with them, the next part of my job is to explain why I don't, right? And why I may have a different opinion, because that they deserve to know what's in my head because they've trusted me to represent them, right? So I during my constituency work, I have a lot of meetings like that. Like oftentimes I think it's not a disagreement. It's like, oh, here's your perspective. That's interesting. How do we help you? But there are times where people come in and they tell me where where they're at. I ask them, can you tell me why you think that way? I understand it. And then I say, well, I'll tell you why I don't think that way. And here's why. And usually we can have a good conversation after that, but they can at least understand where I'm coming from. Because at the end of the day, I go back to them during an election and I ask them, do you still trust me to make decisions on your behalf? Like, that's basically democracy, right? Yeah. And so they need to know what I'm thinking. So this is kind of how I like to approach it in my office. But I take every meeting. So if somebody asks me for a meeting, I take it. Unless there are some reasons why I absolutely can't, which definitely happens with my attorney general work where I can't take a meeting. And then I try to hear as many perspectives as I can.
Lovely. And what would you say is your most proud moment through your work? Any initiative or any reform that you've been able to bring through?
Yeah. So you know what? I would have to have two levels of that because it's hard to pick, but I would say it's hard to pick only one. But I would say like at the constituency office level, we've had some really great victories for people. Like there was a young man whose mother died, didn't have status, and he was worried about medical debt. And we were able to clear that for him. Like we were able to find people housing they're able to secure. So there's like those daily human to human things that we can change, which I love. Like, I think that's a really great thing when you can do that for somebody. And my team in my office is really good at that work too. So we work together on it. The attorney general work is more about changing systems, right? Because what a privilege it is that I get to be in a situation where I can make systems better for people, right? And that's the most exciting thing to me, right? That's the reason that I will work many hours a day and I love my job, is that I can make a whole system better for people. And we've done that in many different ways, I think, through the work that we've done, whether it's through the justice system. I'm working right now. It's hard to pick just one thing, but I'm working on an Indigenous justice strategy that makes the justice system better for Indigenous people. And that's like a through line from all the work I've done as a lawyer, right? That I can be part of that work. We're working hard to make the family law system better, especially for women experiencing violence. That's something that I've worked on in the past too. And I've seen how the system can really be hard on people when they've have that power imbalance of leaving somebody that was abusive. So, the things that I can do, I think through my position now about hopefully helping everybody, like with access to lawyers, with changing rules that, are unfair. We're leading the anti-racism work in our ministry. So the legislation we're able to pass to think about where systemic racism comes up, because government services can be so harmful to people sometimes, right? And one thing that I hear a lot from my community is, well, I came here from whatever country and I had this professional experience. And when I came here, nobody will accept it, right? Like, it's like the hidden racism of that, right? So making that better for people where people are valued. So I think there's just all this stuff that we're working on, or that I can work on. Another thing that I'm really excited about working on is online safety, because I think a lot of young people right now, the justice system is just not keeping up with the harms that people are experiencing online. So we designed a new system to help people, particularly which happens like far more. I was shocked by some of the numbers where people are exploited to give intimate pictures of themselves, like young people, and then they get extorted, right? They get like, I have this picture of you, don't give me this money, then I'm going to distribute it to your friends. And we've had kids commit suicide over that in the province, right? That's how awful it is and how prevalent it is. So we designed a whole system for that, so people can come and get images taken away or get victim services if they need that to protect young people. So I think that's a whole big area of system change that needs to happen about how we can ensure safety online, especially for young people. So it's just some of the things, but there's like lots of work going on.
No, 100%. And I'm sure the list is way longer than that. And I was reading some of the work that you've done around that Online Safety Act and some of the cases that were in the news last year as well. So, kudos to you and the team for taking those initiatives and really making sure that your constituents and the public feel safe out there. So you mentioned the Anti-Racism Act. You come from an immigrant family yourself. Are there any instances through your career or growing up where you had to face racism? Maybe not.
Definitely. I remember, so I think my parents had a different experience because they're they came as immigrants, and their racism, I think, was more, I would say, like systemic in a way, because it was the barriers they faced as somebody that came from the country they did to set up their life. And when I was entering school, I remember just in kindergarten, somebody calling me, something racist when I was going to the washroom. And so definitely there were incidents in school where, you're just a kid and you don't even think about it. You're just going to school, right? You're having fun. And then somebody says something hateful and you think, oh, I am not like you. And, like I'm different than you. And, oh, is something wrong with the color of my skin? Like, is that something that I should be ashamed of? And cause you're a kid and you don't understand. Right. And I think that it stays with you. And so, I think that definitely there were times in politics as well. I mean, you don't really do politics without having the most hateful people have access to commenting at you, or like, I'm laughing because it's like the world we live in. Maybe I shouldn't be, but it just is the way it is, right? It's funny what we accept, but I don't know if you find that when you're out there in public too, but because
I have examples of it. Tons of examples of it.
Yeah, right. It just is this world that's a soup we live in now, which is problematic. But I remember there was one incident when I was running for Van City Board when it had to be a public campaign, and somebody wrote this like really terrible racist thing about we don't want your and all these terrible words people in politics. And the thing that got me about that one was talking to my mom. Like that story never leaves me because she found out about it because it ended up being a story. Yeah. And I called her and I was talking to her and she was so upset on the phone. And it struck me because she was like, we didn't think this was going to happen to you. We came here, we sacrificed all this stuff, leave our family in India and come here. And we thought that you and our kids growing up here wouldn't face that. And so she was disappointed and sad that we had like the next generation has
still going through that.
Yeah. And I just like, I don't know why that was, it was like, it wasn't like it was shocking. It was just like, oh my God, like that's how deep it is, right?
100%.
This sense of like, we gave up so much and we didn't want you to face this, right?
But yet here we are. So question on that. What is your advice then, based on your experience, to other immigrants or newcomers in Canada who might be going through something similar?
Yeah, so we're doing so much as a government on trying to make sure we daylight some of this stuff so we know what's happening. So I would say reach out to the supports that, first of all, it's not acceptable. So sometimes I think people just, they hear it and they say, well, that's the way it is. And that makes me mad because it shouldn't be the way it is, right? It shouldn't be like the amount of sacrifice that immigrants make to come here and the way that our province has been built is relied upon that, like the good work and the contributions of people everywhere. So it shouldn't happen. We have resources in government for them to reach out to, then they should look at it. We just set up a racist incident helpline because I want to be able to track where is happening and to who, and to get supports out there for people that aren't. But, I think the biggest thing that I've learned from people that I've, there's so many amazing South Asian politicians that are kind of my role models that are, and I get to work with that have been around for decades, right? And they just persevere. We have to, we persevere, right? That's the beauty of the persistence that they've shown me, right? Is that do good work and keep at it, right? Like don't let it stop you. I guess.
Don't let the outside noise hinder your progress per se. So question on that. We talked about your top moment and most proud moment. Is there one that comes to your mind which maybe like a failure in the moment or a setback, but then it sets you up for success later in your life? Can you share one?
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, that's a really good question, because there's a door that closes that you're upset about that actually needed to close because you needed the other one.
Yeah, absolutely.
That happens a lot in life, eh? That's a great question. And so it feels like a devastation at the moment, right? Yeah. I would say that happened, interestingly enough, I say that's happened in a lot of ways. I lost an election once, right? I wanted to run for council. I lost an election and that was like really upsetting, because the thing about politics that like I always think is so so hard to get your mind around is that it's so like deeply personal because it's your values, it's your name, it's your background, it's your experience that you're putting towards you, but you can't take anything personally. So it's so hard sometimes. And it's a weird thing to think about, but you can't take it personally, right? Because if you lose an election or somebody says something terrible to you, it's almost not about you, it's about something else. So it's a weird job that way. I've had jobs that I really thought I wanted and I worked to get that I didn't get in the end of the day. And sometimes I think about that, right? Like where my path would have taken me. I've had jobs that I've said no to. Like I had a job offer of leaving law and going to work in Brazil for some international organization. And I was really like, should I do it? Should I do it? And I decided not to. And my life would have taken a totally different path in that circumstance. But 100%. And I've also had times where I've messed up completely. And whether it was a presentation or it was like something I should have done that I didn't in a case. And man, that's a learning experience, but that's definitely happened. But you'll never do it again, right? And
absolutely.
That's the benefit of it. Oh, that's definitely happened to me.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing all that with us. And then I agree with you. It's when you mess up one time, the whole idea is to learn from that opportunity and then implement and make a difference. My next question to you, and this comes from my sister. She's been following your work and she's super inspired by everything that you do. What is your advice to other females out there who want to be leaders in their workplaces? What are the do's and don'ts? How do they stand out?
Yeah, I have to say, so I'd love to meet your sister sometime. And I have to say, I actually love meeting people that are at different stages or earlier stages in their career than mine, because they inspire me to help me remember what it's for. And I had this really terrible moment. I'll tell you a quick story about how I had the worst day at the legislature. And, you know, racism shows up in many different ways, and also obstacles, and also being a female attorney general that's in it. Like all these things show up in my life, in terms of me having to fight for my credibility and fight for, and work hard for it. And I had a really terrible day. And I schedule meetings with like law students just because I want to help them if I can. And at the end of the day, I walk into my office and there's this like very young law student that's sitting there. And she's so eager to learn about like how I got to where I was and everything. And I mean, it brought tears to my eyes. I was like, this is why I do it. Like, This is why I take it on the chin for like being the first woman of color AG. I just take it because I'm going to make it easier for these people. Yeah. And it like helps me get that stubbornness. So, I mean, I would say if any advice that I give, so first of all, there's no substitute for hard work. You got to put the work in. And I think most people believe and understand that when they're achieving things, but there's all these things that I tell people that I think are just the practicalities of how the world looks at your leadership, right? When I walk into a room as Attorney General, it's very different than, you know, when the Premier walked when he was an Attorney General, or when the long list of other Attorney Generals walked in the room. And what I realize and understand with that is that they don't assume power or leadership from somebody like me, right? I have it because of the position that I have, but it doesn't come to people's perception or biases of leadership that it's me, right? So sometimes I'll be like, oh, hi, I'm the Attorney General. And they'll be like, oh, you, right? And that happens, right? Which is fine. But I think that very early on, to hold that space as being that person that knows what they're doing, you have to, if you're in a meeting and you are responsible for something, you have to think of something to say pretty early on that's pretty thoughtful. To shift that dynamic. I think there's something about that. You shift the dynamic of people assuming things about you or what you do or don't have, and make it a good statement, like make it something good, and just find different ways to assert yourself in a way that's effective, understanding that people are assuming things about you when you walk in the room. Right? Yeah, you got to overcome it constantly. I don't know if it makes sense, but
it sure does.
Yeah. Yeah, it helps, I think, establish yourself in scenarios, right? And in positions in organizations, and look for allies. Like another thing that I say to people is the thing that's gotten me through the worst time is my group of, I have mostly, they're also South Asian, of women that I call up and I'm like, you know what happened to me today? This happened to me. And I don't have to explain what all the subcontext or why it was whatever, because they get it. So I can just go to the processing with them. I can process it with them. And that's been really helpful. I would definitely recommend that for people.
That's lovely. Thanks for sharing that. And I'll take that advice as well. What advice would you give to your 20-year-old self, knowing everything you know about life now?
What advice would I give to my 20-year-old self? Oh, so many things. If I was thinking about it, honestly, I would say don't doubt yourself. Because I think, especially for me, and I don't know if this is true for a lot of young people, there was a period of time when I was younger where you don't know who you are, first of all, but the feeling of doubting, like, I'm not good enough. Can I actually do this? What if I fail? What if, I'm not good enough for my parents' expectations, all those things that you just sits in your mind when you're younger, that really isn't helpful, right? I think as you get older, you kind of understand that, that life has a way of finding you if you let it, right? Like if you're open to it and you're thinking about it. But that kind of doubtfulness that I carried around, I think it wasn't useful or helpful.
Yeah, it never is. If you could put a message on a billboard for, let's say, the entire population of BC to see, what is your message going to be and why?
What would my message be? Let me think. I guess like what comes to mind is that, I think there's a sense that we need to have right now in society that we're in this together, like we're not separate. And I think there's too many things that are dividing us, or we think that we're different, or that there's polarization. But really we're all in this together. And it's like, no matter who you are, where you are in the province, you have to be part of it. Like you're valued, we're all part of this society that we're building, right? That we're protecting, that we're raising our kids in, that we're building our life in, and we're all in this together, right? And I think if we had that I worry about the breaking of that solidarity, because no matter our differences, that's just the truth. We'll succeed together, right? If we understand each other and move forward together. And I think sometimes that's lacking. So I guess I would say that. Yeah,
that's a very important message. And if there's a book that has influenced your life, or your most favorite book that you would recommend to myself or the listeners, what would be that book?
Oh, I would say maybe this is kind of like the pattern. It depends on the time in my life. So I don't have one. When I was really growing up, when I was very, very young and I wanted to be environmentalist, I read only Jane Goodall books. And then at some point I read only Nelson Mandela, because I thought his life was I went to South Africa, where I thought his life was just so fascinating, and what a way to live it. And then, you know what, actually, to be honest with you now, this is going to make me sound so weird, but now I really love astrophysics books. I think it's just amazing what they're figuring out about space. So I don't know what some guys would recommend, but it's something that I'm really fascinated by right now. So I guess it's changed over time. I don't know. I would have some books in that category that I have read, or like Neil deGrasse. I don't know if you.
Yeah.
So I love that stuff right now. I think it's almost like this amazing part of humanity that we can figure that stuff out.
Mm-hmm. It definitely is. Maybe I'll get a list from you for all these books, and we'll put it in the show notes.
It's not helpful to you for one book.
But yeah, no, I've been inspired by Nelson Mandela, and I've read his autobiography. I think it's called Road to Freedom. Really, really, really inspiring. So what does the future hold for you? What can we expect in the next 2 years, 5 years from you?
Yeah. So I'm running again in October. I hope to continue because I still have work to do, I think, in this role. Hopefully I get it again. It's funny. I try to narrow it. It's maybe sounds completely cliche, but I just focus on trying to do a good job of the thing that I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And that's as far as my brain takes me. So right now I want to be really good. I want to be really good as Attorney General and do the best that I can every day on the job. And then I'll go through an election and hopefully get a chance to have another role in government that I can do that with. And then we'll see after that, we'll see what the kind of next path is. And I'm always open to stuff, doors opening or experiences opening, and then jumping in. And so
that's awesome. I have full faith in you and full confidence in the next upcoming election as well, with all the work you've done. It's been a slice here talking with you. I know we only have limited time. You're a very busy person, so I really appreciate you taking the time out for myself and the listeners. Before I let you go, any final words, any parting thoughts for us?
I just want to thank you for having me on your show. I'm sure you're learning a whole collection of things, and we should sit down and have coffee about some time from all the people that you're talking to, and all the things that I could learn from them. I think it's so great that you have a chance to talk to people in this really real way, and I really enjoyed having that experience. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. So thank you for being there, and thank you for your time.